Hi, this is Casey Hinds, your mayor, and today for our episode of Eye on the City, we are here at our Piqua water treatment plant, and I have with us Don Freitsteller, our water treatment plant supervisor, or superintendent, and Bob Jennings, our water treatment plant assistant superintendent. And they are going to take us on a walking tour of this beautiful, beautiful new facility that we've had here in our city for over a year, actually about a year and a half now, is that right?
Yeah, very close.
About a year and a half. We opened it in June 2017. So we are going to invite you, our Piqua citizens, to go on a walking tour of our beautiful new water treatment plant.
We bring a lot of kids through for tours for the schools, and one thing I like to do, as soon as we say we add chemicals to the water, they all are like, oh no. And I always refer to it as like when your mom cooks. Your mom has to add ingredients to the food to make it taste better and so that you can eat it. Well, we do the same thing here to water. We add a small amount of chemical so the water becomes drinkable, and also so it's safe to drink, and also so that it tastes better. So that's what we do basically here in this building. This is where we store the chemicals and where we start the addition of them. The room that Don just exited, this is our lime room. Inside the room we have 2 lime slakers, and what that means is we have a powdered lime that comes in, mixes with water, and it comes out as a slurry, basically like a milky liquid. And the lime is used to soften the water. We are a lime softening facility because we use surface water. We do lime softening to soften the water as it comes through the process. We use a product here called sodium hexametaphosphate, and what this does, it's a sequestering agent. So we put this in the water, it kind of helps stabilize the water, which prevents corrosion of lead and copper into the water. That's a big topic in the news right now. So we add this chemical that helps prevent that from happening. It coats the pipes and prevents that lead or copper from leaching into your water. So this is just a small chemical that we add here. It comes in dry form, we mix it with water, and then we pump that into the water as it goes through the process. This room behind us, this is our sodium hypochlorite room. What you would know is bleach. It's at a 12% bleach. This is what we use to disinfect the water. This is added actually after the water goes completely through the plant process. It's actually stored in here, and then we add it to the water before it reaches our clear well. Like I said, this is what we put in to disinfect the water, kills all the germs that are in the water. Just like you would use household bleach at home, this is what we use here. By EPA regulations, we have minimums and maximums of levels of this that we have to meet, and everything runs through our pumps here that we make sure that we're meeting those regulations and keeping this to where it can do its best work, but yet not have too much of it in the water also. As you'll notice here also, we're standing over grading. This is a full containment area. We have 2 5,500-gallon tanks. Every room has a full containment area, capacity enough if we would have a leak, it would store right in here and we could dispose of it properly. So we have a lot of safety things in place here, to make sure if something like that would ever happen. So,
Bob, one of the other things that the EPA and both our neighbors here in the area really like about this is that instead of a gas chlorine that we used at the old plant that came in 1-ton cylinders and was an extremely dangerous inhalation hazard, we now have this liquid that's far safer to not only our staff, but to the people in the community. And so this changeover was a real plus to staff and the Piqua community.
Down here on the end, this is basically a mirror image of the sodium hypochlorite room. But this is where we store a chemical called ferric sulfate. Ferric sulfate is an iron base, just like the word ferric says, and what this is, it's a coagulant aid. So what that means is we add this to our untreated water, the raw water that comes into the plant, and what the purpose of this chemical is, it helps the dirt particles in the water start to stick together. It's a coagulant aid, so it helps those dirt particles coagulate or get bigger. And we want that because as they get bigger, they'll settle out better. So we add this to our raw water. It comes in a liquid form. We add a very small amount in, and like I said, it just helps those dirt particles get bigger. So when we go through the process, as you'll see when we go outside, you'll see how quickly the dirt in the water settles out, and then it'll clear up.
I know that on June 1st, 2017 at midnight is when we started to use this water plant. We switched over from our old water plant to this one. And some of our citizens may not know, our old water treatment plant was from 1925, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. 93 years old.
93 years old. So we had that water treatment plant for 93 years, and now obviously we've been here since June 2017. But I wanted you guys to speak a little bit about why it was we had to shift from the old treatment plant to this one. There were a lot of EPA guidelines and things that needed to take place, and obviously at 93 years old, sometimes things do need to be renovated, remodeled, or even refigured, as we have with our water treatment plant.
It all really started back in 2006, and we had an EPA survey. At that time, they had made us aware that the regulations on our disinfection byproducts were going to become much more stringent in the near future. So at that time, we brought in an engineering firm to do an evaluation of the 1925 facility. At that point in time, we evaluated, was it better to look at repairing the old facility? Could we repair the old facility? Where it sat at the bottom of the hydraulic levee, was it a wise place to put a large investment? And with that, the evaluation truly came out that the facility had outlived its useful life. Much of the equipment was extremely worn. The tanks had a lot of concrete failure going on, and the actual decision to look at building a brand new facility was a real obvious choice at that point in time.
Well, I think 93 years, some people don't even live 93 years. I mean, that's really a long time, and it served our community very well for those years. So so I know some of the things that we've seen as we have moved from that facility to this facility, and some of the testing that you do. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yes, the disinfectant byproduct is the biggest regulation we were going to have problems meeting. So the numbers that we get are on a quarterly basis, and we test 4 locations throughout the city. And those are at the locations where the water has been in our system for the longest period of time. They want to know how much is going to build up the byproducts the longer it's in the system. It takes about 5 days to turn the complete water over in our distribution system, which is 110 miles of water mains and now 3 large water towers. So we have 3.5 million gallons of water stored. So if we treat 3 million a day, just to turn those tanks over is a day's worth of water we produce. Our numbers that we get now through this facility compared to the old ones are what, Bob, almost a 75% improvement.
Yeah, of the old plant.
As to the quality of water we're putting out to the citizens.
Yeah.
The other things that we didn't know back when we started this process, one of the big things on the radar now is the toxic allergen situation. Like the city of Toledo had a do not use order go out, and their entire community couldn't consume their water. So part of the treatment process we'll see later on is granular activated carbon, and that is also the best technology to remove that. Years ago, we made the New York Times for a high level of atrazine that we had in our water. Not exactly the way you want to get into the newspaper, but even the granular activated carbon also removes that. So in the spring, when farmers are doing a lot of work in the fields and we have runoff coming in, this treatment plant is much more prepared to handle all those situations. So a lot of thought and a lot of future planning went in as we looked at this. The old facility had all the chemicals dumped into one location. None of the every chemical we put in needs of what's called a reaction time or detention time to be able to do their job properly and get the most effective use out of the money we spend on the chemicals. Here, each chemical has a location, it has time to work as it should, and so we get the maximum use out of the investment we make in the chemicals, and it results in a much better quality water.
Yeah, one of the problems at the old plant was the footprint was so small. That was also an issue because everything, you know, that building was a lot smaller, and where we had to, like Don said, to input the chemicals, there just wasn't any room. We looked at expanding in different ways, and we even looked at ways to adding the granular activated carbon filters down there. We even priced what it'd take to bring something in, even in like in a box truck or a semi, and run our water through that, and it just wasn't feasible. I mean, the cost of that was just astronomical, and it just just wasn't feasible to do. So we just didn't have the space down there to, even if we wanted to make changes, there wasn't enough room to do it.
Well, there's not really enough room to really build anything on down there. I mean, I know, having gone through that treatment plant back when I was in Government Academy,
right,
there's not a lot of other room down there to
yeah,
even
exactly.
expand. So.
Right, certainly.
Yep. Okay. All right. Well, why don't we talk a little bit about what we have out here?
Yeah, as we walk outside, this first basins that we come to, these are what we call our flocculation basins. And this is what kind of like when we talked about inside with the addition of the coagulant aid. This is where that kind of takes place. In here, each one of these basins has 3 different stages, and inside each stage is a paddle wheel that just spins around in circles, just like you'd see on the back of a paddle boat. And what that does is that's mixing that water, and it's allowing that chemical to get that dirt in the water to start to stick together. And if you look in, if you were here and you could look close enough, you could see little particles on top. That's called flock. And that's what we want, is those particles to start to form in there, because once the water leaves this basin, when it goes to the next basin, that flock particles will settle out right to the bottom. What we have here is we have 3 separate trains. Each train is rated to carry about 2.25 million gallons of water through it for treatment. We have 3, which gives us the total plant capacity of 6.75 million gallons.
So each train is doing the same thing?
That's correct. Typically, we will run 2 trains at a time, and we have one just in standby mode, always ready to go. Everything we have here is redundant. So all of our pumps inside for our chemicals, we have 2 of them. One's running, one's on standby if something fails. We always have to keep producing water, so we always have a redundancy of things. So if something would happen, we always have a backup ready to go and in place.
And these are options with the redundancies we did not have at the old facility.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so our dependability level here is so much better, and that's another one of the big reasons that having a new facility with plenty of space and the backups is a real plus for us.
You know, and I always say, having traveled in a lot of developing countries, I lived in Jamaica one summer with a family, and it was a summer of a 70-year drought. And they caught a lot of their water from the rain, and that's what they used in their family and for, you know, different things, not only for cooking, but just in general. And we don't realize, you know, how wonderful it is to turn on our tap and have water, clean water coming out whenever we want it, and the dependability of that whenever we need it, it's there. And, you know, when you don't have it, you really miss it, but you don't realize how dependable our water, you know, the ability for it is here in our city and our country as well.
Another big advantage that we have here at the new plant, to kind of piggyback on the redundancy thing, is we also have a full gas generator, natural gas generator, that'll run this entire plant. At the old facility, we had a diesel generator that was just big enough that if we ran around and plugged cords in everywhere, it took us probably about a half hour just to get all the cords plugged in. We could run the plant about 1/3 of what we would need to on a normal basis. We could produce just a little bit of water to get us by, but it was a big ordeal just to even get it up and running. Here, as soon as if we would happen to lose city power, our generator would kick on within 10 seconds and it's up and running, and it can run the entire plant and not miss a beat, and we just keep right on running like we wouldn't even know anything happened.
Wow.
So that's really nice that we have that capability here to do that as well.
So our procedure on those, just to share a little of how our maintenance staff chimes in with the rest of our treatment staff, is every month that generator is put online, not only here but at our raw station as well. They're operated for 4 hours under load, and then twice a year we actually run that generator around the clock 24 hours to make sure it's dependable if we have a long-term outage.
Yeah.
So that's where our maintenance staff is very vital to the process as well.
Well, and I think that's one thing for our citizens to know, that when it comes to water, when it comes to power, dependability is something that we can celebrate here in our city with the fact that it's there when we need it. And, you know, our city employees do a really, really good job of maintaining that for our citizens. So thank you.
So here we are, we talked about our settling basin, and what happens here is exactly what it says. The dirt particles settle out in this basin. So the water comes in at the end where we're standing. It slowly moves through to the other end of the basin, and as it does, those flock particles that we talked about in the last process settle out to the bottom of this basin. When they do, we have collectors that run, pull it all up to this front corner where there's a little drain area, and we pull that, what we call sludge, out of there, is our term for it. It's basically the dirt that's in the water. We pull that up, and then we have the ability to basically recycle that. So we bring it right back to the start of the process. By EPA regulations, we're only allowed to bring so much back at a time, but we do that, and then that actually helps because it adds a little bit of body to the water, and that's kind of helps that dirt even stick together even more. So none of this water is actually wasted, and it helps too because we've already had chemicals to this. So when we bring it back around, we're not wasting those chemicals. We just basically recycle the dirty water off the bottom back to the beginning of the plant and then bring it right back through again. Like I said, as this goes through, it moves through real slow. This basin actually holds almost 450,000 gallons of water just in this basin alone. And it takes a long time for that water to move through here. As Don said earlier, it takes 16 hours to go through the entire plant. So as it moves through here nice and slow, it gives that dirt particle time to settle out to the bottom. When we come out to the other end, we have nice clean water then before we go to our filtration process.
What's the average number of gallons that you would say that we use a day as a city?
We're averaging between about 2.8 and 3 million gallons a day is what we found here at the new plant. That was another one of the issues with the old plant. All of our antiquated equipment didn't work properly. And sometimes it was, we were really kind of guessing at how much water we had coming in and leaving because our metering just wasn't up to stuff as good as, as good as it should be. And up here, we have a much better handle on how much water we have coming in, how much water we have coming out, and so forth. So we're averaging around 2.8 to 3 million gallons a day. Another thing I want to talk about before we go inside we'll go inside the plant to where our filters are. But as we talked about this settling basin, our goal here is to make basically the water as clear as we can make it. This water is still not drinkable because it hasn't been disinfected, but we're trying to make it as clear and as clean as we can. EPA regulations have that when the water leaves our filters, at the bottom of our filters, they cannot exceed a turbidity of 0.5. And Don talked about turbidity, that's the cleanliness of the water, amount of dirt in the water. Also coming here, we went from, at the old plant, we had 6 rapid sand filters. Here we only need 4 because they're rated at a higher capacity. So typically we'll run either 2 or 3 of these filters at a time. The water comes into the top of the filter. It goes through the media. It's basically like a sand and gravel layer. As it comes through, it goes through from the top to the bottom, comes out the bottom of the filter, and we talked about that just finishes clearing up the water, gets out the rest of the dirt particles. After a period of time, we have to what we call backwash the filters. What we do is we just introduce water from the bottom up. That washes the dirt particle out. That goes out and goes out a drain, goes to a holding tank that we have, and then again we recycle that water back to the beginning of the process. So again, it's not wasted, but every so often these filters do have to be cleaned, and that's what we do there. Actually here in Piqua, we're kind of fortunate. We're a surface water plant, but we have 3 different sources. So we can utilize the Great Miami River, which is our primary source, and is basically what the EPA based our yield from this plant off of, is because it's our most ready source. It's always there. We also have the hydraulic canal, which consists of Swift Run, the canal, Echo Lake, and so forth that we can pull water from. And then we also have a gravel pit or part of an old stone quarry off of Piqua-Lockington Road that we pull water from. That's our best quality water. However, the yield there isn't always that great. We get around 1.4 million gallons a day from that on average. The rest we kind of blend with water from the river if we can. If the water from the river gets dirty, and then sometimes we'll have to go to Swift Run Lake and get that water from there. The nice thing with at the old plant, if we wanted to switch our sources, we'd have to send somebody out to the quarry to turn the pump on or off, or over to the river pump building to turn the pump on or off. Here, everything is on our Scada system or our computer, where the operator in the lab, if we would get a phone call that had, if something would contaminate the river, and we got a phone call that said, hey, there was an accident on 75, tanker truck fell in the river, we can shut the river off in about 10 seconds just by the operator pushing a button and closing the gate. And as soon as that closes, we're off of that source, and then the water from the lake would start coming in. Or thankfully, since we've been here, we test, as Don mentioned earlier, for toxic algae. The EPA requires us during the summer months to test that weekly. During the winter, we test it bi-weekly. Thankfully, we have not had any issues here, but if we would, we have multiple sources. And they don't require us, they only require us to test the water, our raw water that's blended coming into the plant. We still test every source individually every week. That way we know what's happening at each place. So if we would have a detection in Swift Run, we know we don't want to go to that water until we could take care of the algae problem.
So we are testing that every single week.
That's correct, yes.
We have that ability in-house in our lab.
Yeah.
Very few communities in this area. Salina, I think, is the only
Salina
other
is the only
in this
other one,
area
yeah,
that can do that testing in-house.
Well, don't we have a lot of communities sending us their water to be tested for some of the stuff that we do? I remember that from Government Academy.
At this time, we have Sydney sending their algae samples.
Yeah.
We were doing some for Greenville, but just Sydney at this time. But it's convenient for them as well. They're only 7 miles away, and the results is email or text to them every day that we run a sample once a week. The other thing that Bob mentioned a little was the Scada equipment that we have in this new facility. As we've been walking through, you can tell it's a very, very large facility. From 3 in the afternoon till 7 in the morning, we only have one person here. So if you're anywhere in this building, we can walk up to a panel, either here or in the chemical building where we started out, and there's an alarm system that operator can hear either the phone or something's going wrong. He walks up to the screen and he can address or find out exactly what it is within just a few steps of where he's at.
One of the other things that I really like about this facility is the safety of it. As Don mentioned, from 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 7 o'clock in the morning, there's one person here by themselves. We want to ensure that that person's safe. So we actually have a system that every hour at 10 till the top of the hour, a button will essentially pop up on their computer screen. If they don't acknowledge that button within 5 minutes, it starts flashing red. If they don't acknowledge it at the top of the hour, it calls the plant telephone to let them know. If they still don't acknowledge it, then it starts calling Don or I. It'll call me first to let me know that the operator hasn't responded. If I'm not available, it'll immediately call Don. If he's not available, then it'll call 911 to let them know. And we also have the same thing set up for our emergency showers. Our emergency showers in the chemical building in the lab, if one of those is activated, it'll automatically send an alarm in the plant. If it's after hours, it'll start the phone call process. It'll call the plant, and then it'll call me, it'll call Don. That doesn't wait 10 minutes, that happens immediately. So if an operator would have something and be in distress, they could hit that emergency shower and they'll know help's on the way pretty soon. We had none of that at the old plant whatsoever. Once the water goes through all our filter process, it then goes to an underground well that we have, we call it our clear well. So once the water goes there and it's in the clear well, it is then potable or drinkable. At the old plant, our clear well is just about a little million to 1.5 million gallons. Here we have a full 2 million gallon clear well. Sits at the bottom of the hill, basically across from Johnson Farm. You can kind of see it if you're going out Hardin Road. And like I said, that holds 2 million gallons of water. Once our water is in there, from there we can start to pump it and then pump it into our distribution system and where it's ready to be. There's some different samples that we collect. Daily we collect what we call a system sample. That can be collected from anywhere within the city. So during the day we have a laboratory technician, supervisor who goes out and gets that sample, and he varies it up wherever he goes throughout the day.
So anywhere in the public facility?
It doesn't matter, yeah.
Okay.
On the weekends, a lot of our guys will get them from their home and just bring it in from their home when they come into work. We do have one guy that lives out of town, so he'll come in early and he'll stop at Speedway, Tim Hortons, or wherever, get his coffee and grab a sample from there and bring it in with him. Other samples that we're required to do by the Ohio EPA is our bacteria samples. We're required to collect 20 samples a month. Now those have to be gotten from specific locations throughout the city. And the EPA, we can kind of pick those, we just have to have them okayed by the EPA. They like a lot of those to be 24-hour access. That way if we would have something at night where we have to get a bacteria sample, we have the ability to get that. So we have a list of 30 places for even number months and a list of 30 places for odd number months. We also make sure on those places that we have a lot of our critical users. And by that I mean our schools, our nursing homes. We make sure that we are getting samples from those places on a monthly basis to make sure that that water is safe there as well. So they're on that list. And we also just have places like your basic restaurants, Speedway gas station, McDonald's, places like that that we can easily get into, and they're very gracious to let us come in. They know what we're doing. They're familiar with our staff. We grab our sample, do that testing, and then we get out. So
actually all food services are glad to see us come.
Exactly, yeah,
Because
they
if
want
they
that as
had
well.
someone say something's wrong and they know that they can assure that we've been in and have taken bacteria samples to ensure the water's all safe.
One thing that's important to mention also is nobody likes a boil advisory. As soon as they hear that, and you know, since we've come to the new plant, at the old plant we had some issues in the plant with breakdowns and so forth that required us to issue boil advisories. I'm not saying it can't happen here, because it can, because there's still equipment here that can break down. But our reliability is a lot stronger here. But one thing that's important to mention is just because there's a boil advisory, that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with the water. That means that there potentially could be something wrong with the water. There's a big difference there. So when we issue that boil advisory, that's because we want to make sure that there's nothing wrong with the water. So what we do is, if the EPA sometimes will require us to do that. Like, we had a water repair going on for a water repair main going on actually yesterday, and that required a shutdown of part of that main. Because of that, there's the potential that some dirt could have got in the water. So because of that, the EPA requires us to do a boil advisory for those homes that were affected by that shutdown. So we went out last night. Once they got finished, we grabbed samples. It takes 24 hours for those samples to go through. They sit in an incubator for 24 hours. We come back and read them, and then if they're safe, if they're okay, they come out negative, then we can notify the people and say, yes, the water is safe. I've been with the city for almost 30 years here at the water plant, for 27 years, and I've only seen one of those samples come back positive one time in those 27 years, that there was an issue that we actually found with the water. So very rarely does that happen, but it's just a precaution. We just want to make sure, take the time to make sure that the water is safe, because we don't want somebody to drink water that's not safe. So we issue that precaution just to be, you know, like I said, just to be safe. We do the testing, and it usually comes back that it is okay. Then we can allow the people to start drinking. And we've had people call and say, can I drink it? And we're like, no, we don't. We want you to boil your water to make sure that before we can tell you that it is safe. Don't take a chance. If we issue a boil advisory, there is a reason. We want to make sure it's safe. So, you know, follow those orders. It is important.
Okay, we are now in the lab of our water treatment plant, and before we start talking about what's going on in here and what happens in here, I thought it'd be interesting to talk about the expertise and the training that our employees that work here should have. I mean, it's not just somebody walks in, gets a job, and starts working here. There's a lot of training and expertise that goes on in order to get certified to do a lot of the things that happens here.
Yes, we're very fortunate here. All of our staff now currently is licensed with at least a Class 1 water supply license. This facility has to be under the supervision of a Class 4 license because we treat surface water. So to that end, I have the Class 4, and so ultimately I'm responsible for the facility. But each and every one of the guys that works here is my eyes and ears, and so they're very important, to the point that the minimum license we'll have someone working here with is a Class 1. But you don't just go down to the local shop and get a Class 1 license. So in order to get a Class 1 license, you have to go to our classes that are offered. It's called Beginning Water Treatment. A guy has to have 12, or guy or lady, very much so now in the facilities, you'll see much more ladies involved. But you have to have 12 months experience of operating a treatment plant in order to get that license. Now you can take the test sooner, and now the tests are given on a monthly basis, and Dayton is the most local area you can do that under. It's called an ABC testing cycle. The state still offers theirs testing twice a year, so an operator can go there and free of charge take well, not free of charge, at a minimal charge, and take that test. So we require every operator to have at least a Class 1. I now have 2 guys, I think, left that only have Class 1s.
Just one?
Just one, that's correct. And so I have people that are so dedicated here that they have went and got their Class 2s and 3s, though not required. And some of them have went ahead of their time element, because with a 1, there's 12 months experience required. A 2, you have to have 3 years experience of working. I have 2 guys that have their 2s passed and haven't got their experience time in yet. A 3 takes 5 years experience, and in order to get a 4, you have to be in charge of this a Class 3 facility at least for 3 years as a supervisor in charge of that facility. So that's how the license for that goes. But you can't even work in this lab by yourself until you've went in front of the Ohio EPA and proved to them that you know how to do the testing. So we start a guy out, he works with other staff members for at least 6 to 8 weeks. Once he gets his testing to where we feel that he's competent at it, he does a parallel testing that we have to record for 30 days, and then that is sent to the state for review, and he's given a temporary license. Then we had to pay the state to come over and do an on-site inspection with him, usually lasts 4 to 6 hours. And they come over from Columbus, and that guy has to stand there right in front of the state and perform all these tests within 10% of anything they bring and spike those samples with. He has to get that results.
Wow.
So every one of the guys have been through that. And the first time you do it, everybody's a nervous wreck.
Yeah, I'm sure, I'm sure. Well, and I just wanted to point that out to our citizens, because the expertise not only in the creation of this water treatment plant, but also of our employees who keep this going and run the testing every day. There is a lot of expertise, a lot of training that has gone into making sure that our water is safe to drink and use.
Definitely. We have a staff of 12 here. Don is a superintendent, me as the assistant superintendent, then we have an administrative assistant, and then we have one full-time maintenance guy, and then we have a full-time maintenance working supervisor, and then we have our operators under that. We have 8 operators that fall under that, or 7 operators, I'm sorry. As Don mentioned, you know, he has his Class 4 license, but we have 5 other people with a Class 3 license. So over 50% or 50% of our staff have a Class 3 license or higher. And you just don't see that a lot in a lot of other facilities. And we have 3 other guys with a Class 2, 1 with a Class 1, and even our maintenance working supervisor in charge of our maintenance department, he has a Class 3 water supply license as well. And we require our maintenance supervisor to have that license, so when he's working on equipment, he understands what he's working on and how it could affect the treatment process. That way we just don't have a maintenance guy go out and turn something off to work on it and not understand what he is working on. So we're very fortunate to have, like Don said, a dedicated staff and a very smart staff that knows what they're doing. Once you get your license, you just don't get to keep it. You have continuing education hours just like everything else. So with a Class 2 or above license, you have to have 24 hours of education every 2 years to keep that license. Class 1 has to have 12 hours. So where our guys are going online courses or seminars. Our main lab guy just Monday was at the wastewater facility. A company came in, was doing a laboratory training, and he was there and he got continuing education hours for that. And also on the testing that Don mentioned that we're also required every 2 years to have that updated. So just because you're certified in the lab, they come every 2 years to re-go over that certification. So the guy will come in and all the operators will have to be here that day, and they'll watch everybody perform all the tests to make sure that, so even though you're first certified, they come back every 2 years to check up on you to make sure you know what you're doing. So they're always looking over our shoulder. I mean, they're our boss, and we make sure we're meeting their guidelines. And like I said, our guys do a great job of assuring that our water meets that.
So is this some of the testing that's done every day? I feel like I'm in like the chemistry lab.
Right, yeah, I mean, it's basically what it is, yeah. We do different types of testing. We test throughout the treatment process to see how our chemicals are working, to make sure. We talked about lime doing the softening. We have certain parameters that we like to keep that lime between, so it's doing its best and most economical job. So they're running tests every hour actually to make sure that's working like it should. If not, they may have to make an adjustment on the feed. And then the EPA requires us on our tap, our water that goes to the city, they require us to do certain testing on that every 2 hours, and even more elaborate testing every 4 hours on that water. And there are certain parameters that are set forth by the Ohio EPA that we have to meet. Our chlorine level in the water, the turbidity, like we talked about how clean that water is. To leave our plant, that turbidity we talked about has to come out of a filter at a 0.5. To leave the plant, it has to be at a 0.3. I can look right here. Our water leaving the plant today, the last sample you got was a 0.074. So we have to be below 0.3, we're below a 0.1. Yeah, so we're sending out some pretty clear, clean water. If you see behind us, there's these 3 computer screens. We have a camera system for security also, but the other 3 screens, that is what we call our Scada system. That is basically the eyes of the plant for the operator. Now, one thing we spell out, and the plant is computer assisted. It's not computer ran. The operator runs the plant. However, he is computer assisted. At the old plant, if he wanted to make a change to a chemical, he had to run downstairs and physically make a change. Here, we can make a change on the computer. But the operators still do their walkthroughs, they still check equipment. And also every operator, some of our stuff is automated. Just for instance, our high service pressure, the pressure that the pumps run to leave the water to the plant. We have that set at a certain pressure. However, the operators know how to manually do that, and periodically we have them run the plant in manual, so they're familiar with how to do it if something would happen with the automated system or what does run automatically. They can also do that manually. And we even have a manual written up that's required by the Ohio EPA that tells how to run this plant manually. There's a written manual, but they all know how to do it. When we first started the plant, this wasn't in full operation. We ran the plant in manual for the first startup anyways, and Don and I wanted that because we wanted the guys to know how to do it before they knew how to do a lot of it in automatic. That way, if something did happen, they already knew what they were going to do because they had the familiarity with doing that. So
is this where you can make the switch if there's an issue with the Miami River?
Exactly.
So this is where you make that switch to move to another water supply. I also see our water distribution towers listed on there, so you can kind of monitor those.
We can control our pump stations as well. Our city is divided into 3 pressure zones, the west, central, and east. We have R.M. Davis Water Tower on the west end. The Ziegler Road pumps would fill that tower. The central zone is actually controlled from here now since we have the new water tower. That was another huge improvement for the city. Our old 2 water towers were not quite tall enough to function as they should with the pressure in the system, where the new water tower is. So it actually can fill and drain back into the system as it does. So that tower is controlled from here at the plant. Then the east pressure zone is the Ash Street Tower out by Walmart, and that is controlled by a pump station on Hardin Road, Hetzler Road right off of 25A. So they can control all those pumps from here as well, see how much water is in the water towers, and they're not only running the plant, but they're also controlling the distribution system as well.
I know that as I go around and talk to other cities who are dealing with some of the same issues we dealt with our old water treatment plant and their need to upgrade and to do something similar to what we've done here, there's a lot of conversations about, and I know we've had conversations before about the possibility that other cities could tap into our water treatment plant. And it is available that if cities need to do that, correct?
Yes, we have the capacity available here. Currently, we can treat 6.75 million a day with a very minimal amount of extra addition to just another set of the said basins, or what Bob called a train. We can go up to 9 million gallons on this site and not have to do anything but put in another said basin flocculator. So we have that ability for growth industrial-wise, or if another community wants to tap into our system, a subdivision come on, we are ready to serve water to other entities at that point in time.
And that's a big also for industry looking to possibly come to town to know that we have a good supply of water. We talked about, I just checked, we're running the plant flow today is at 2.8 million gallons, which we talked about is about our average. So we have 6.75, we have over 3 million gallons available. And one thing at the old plant, it was rated at 7 million gallons a day, but you didn't want to go over much over 3 to 3.5 million gallons a day because it didn't do a very good job. Here, we can run that 4 or 5 million gallons of water, 6 million through this plant. We don't have an issue like we had at the old plant. Even though it was rated higher, it was a little sketchy when you got the flow up pretty high there, just because of how old and the way the process worked there. It just didn't do a real good job. Here, we feel real comfortable with going to the full capacity and still being able to meet requirements. So.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your sharing of the background of this treatment plant. Is there anything else you want to share with our citizens before we kind of close this episode up?
We just want to let the citizens know that we're open. If they want to come out and take a tour, we'd be more than happy to bring them through, show them what we do. Open their eyes a little bit. Like you mentioned, people turn on their water and they think there's just water there, and if it's not there, where's my water? They don't realize the process that it actually goes through. But we have an open door policy. You can call out 778-2090 anytime. Schedule a tour. We'd be more than happy to bring people through if they want to come through.
Excellent. And I know you said the schools are doing that. There's been quite a few school groups that have come out and see the water plant.
Yeah.
Well, Don and Bob, thank you so much for being part of this episode of Eye on the City. I know our citizens will enjoy watching this. I thank you for tuning in today, and continue to tune in as we travel around different parts of our city to see and learn a little more about what makes the city of Piqua move and just grow and do a variety of things, not only for our citizens, but for the entire Miami Valley. Thank you for being with us today.